Hello YouTube, it's yourself, and yes, I am here with my trusty butterfly pen and unicorn slash butterfly rabbit thing. Okay, so I've got screeds of notes on the thing. To those of you who are not in the UK, or to those of you who are unaware, Channel 4 in the UK are doing a gender season, which is, as far as I'm concerned, it's great. There are some choices that they've made with it that I'm a bit at odds with, but I am waiting to see what the kind of final result is before passing judgment. Warning, I'm going to put this in the title anyway, but warning, there will be spoilers, so, because like I'm doing a review of Genderquake, which is like it's a TV program where basically what they did, it's like Big Brother for people of all sort of genders, including cisgendered, non-binary, gender fluid, yada yada. Yeah, the whole, well, not the whole spectrum, because that's not really feasible. But yeah, so I had to make all the notes that you can see there. I don't know if you can read that, but I don't even know if I can read it. Yay! But I tried to take down people's names, but I failed for some of them. Basically, I think it was like 11 people were staying in a house. Okay, and I think what Channel 4's aim was to sort of challenge people's perceptions about gender, really. And on the whole, actually, I'm gonna do this before I actually sort of go into the pernickety details about it. On the whole, actually, I found the program to be quite, I won't say sympathetic because it didn't seem to hold bars, but I found it to be quite interesting and, what's the word? Like, it sort of highlighted some of the issues that cisgender people kind of, not cisgender people, sorry, transgender people go through on a daily basis, and the kind of almost disrespect that people have for that, because they kind of, yeah, I'll explain it more later on, because I don't want to give too much away of my own video at the start of this. But I'm gonna give you all the spoilers. Sorry, I just knocked a thing over at my feet, hence why but yeah. Anyway, so, right at the start, one of the people in it, I think it was Saffron, who identifies as non-binary, said, "To those people that that have said we don't exist, I'm right fucking here." Now, I have said that in previous videos. It's so true. Like, don't discount someone as who identifies as gender fluid, or any of the kind of middle genders. I call them middle genders, like non-binary sort of categories. I can't speak today. Don't tell them that they don't exist. It's so invalidating, for one thing. And also, who are you to tell me what my gender identity is? Like, who are you to kind of... Yeah. I don't pass judgment on yours, you don't pass judgment on mine. We cool? Yo? Okay, so, I'm gonna just try and read my notes. I felt like I was back at university again, it was quite weird. But, you know, I wanted to do it properly. So, we had Campbell, who identifies as a woman. I don't... Oh, one of my speakers is making a funny noise. I do apologise. She is glamorous. She's been on hormones for 6 years. Like, and she was quite young. She was 22. And has had like all this sort of kind of, yes, the question about the surgery came up, and yes, she'd had the surgery down there done, gender reassignment surgery, but she was the only one that actually disclosed that, which it's up to her, because I think she actually came out and said it. It was kind of asked, like, there were two women who identify as trans women sharing a room, and I think they were sort of discussing, like, oh, are you on hormones? No, not yet. I blah blah blah. What have you had done? In those circumstances, I know that I often say, like, don't talk about the surgery, don't do that. Like, in those circumstances, it's okay. It's when you're a random stranger, or even if you're a friend, and you start talking about it, that's when it becomes incorrect. That's when I'm like, no, that's not right. Whereas they were coming from a sort of shared understanding of their journeys, and also, you know, like, we're kind of talking about what they, you know, it was girl talk, but tran talk, if you like, which I do, and I have had occasionally. Next up is a person called Phoenix, who didn't really appear too much in this episode, but I have a feeling will appear more as the series goes on. But they identify as gender fluid, and are, I think they said something like 70% female, but, you know, have a shaven head, which is, some would say, is a kind of like a sort of male stereotype, but actually the way that Phoenix sees it is that they are like a strong woman with shaved head, which, again, great. Whatever your identity, whoever you are, do your hair however you like. It's not a man's hairstyle or a woman's hairstyle, it's yours. You know, and that's not by the way, I should say, whenever I say things like that, I'm not negating those who are well, I don't mean to, those who do identify at either end of the binary. I just mean that I think that it's these terms are kind of possibly outdated, and if you, like, for instance, the other day I went shopping with my friend, hello Ellen, and we were looking at eyeshadow, and I was like, I am so tempted by this because it was purple and unicorny. It was actually called Unicorn Hologram Makeup. But up until fairly recently, I haven't felt comfortable kind of going back into my sort of feminine side because I feel like I've had something to prove. But now I'm feeling a bit more settled in myself. I don't feel that quite so much. Everybody's different, but for me, it would make life a hell of a lot easier if we stopped gendering everything. Just because I don't feel comfortable walking into a department that says women's clothing, nor do I feel comfortable walking into a department that says men's clothing. I do it, but it makes me feel on edge. Just something to consider. Or, you know, even I think it's like Topshop maybe have now got gender neutral changing rooms. I don't shop in there because, like, I'm 10 sizes too big for their clothes, but, you know, things, tiny little adjustments like that go a long way to making a whole bunch of other people feel more comfortable in themselves. Okay, and we have Saffron, who was 22, who I mentioned before, who had the, you know, like, don't tell me we don't exist thing. But I think they've always felt like a kind of like a tomboy from what they were saying, a very kind of, yeah, found it very difficult. They got quite emotional at points, and their story resonates a lot with me. and I'm keen to see how they're gonna sort of come along, what's gonna come of them, in a sense. Moving on quickly, we have Tom. He is a straight cis male. Lucky bastard. I'm joking. I'm not joking. He doesn't get that the spectrum, what have I written here? Doesn't get the spectrum, would maybe go with a trans woman. Which is something that he said, you know, like if he sort of found someone attractive and it turned out that they were a trans woman, I think he sort of implied that it wouldn't be too much of an issue. He might kind of have to have difficulty adjusting, but realistically, yeah. But he's the one that I saw made the biggest steps in that in that 1 hour episode. He went from never really having met trans people, not understanding what the term non-binary means, to just being like, fuck it, you are who you are, you know. And he didn't care, and it was wonderful. And he sort of, that's what you want in the world. You want people who just don't give a shit. And he seemed fairly secure in his own sort of masculinity, and his own identity. There was no question about him having ever questioned his own. Then we have Charlie, who was another trans woman. She was lovely. Didn't really seem to see her very much in this episode. Again, probably see her more later. And then Brooke, who's interesting, who has a rare condition. I can't remember what it's called. It is one where they've ended up with both male and female characteristics, so a bit like intersex, but I don't think it's the same condition, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me on it, and don't shoot me. But basically they have characteristics of both male and female. I think certainly from the way that they present, that they identify as mostly female, but yeah, again, that's one that I think will come out. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting changes throughout the series. I think it's going to be, I'm keen to see what happens. Okay. Then we have a person that I couldn't remember his name for a while, so I've just written man that wears makeup. That's how he identifies. His name's Marcus, and he identifies as male, but just likes to wear makeup and, you know, sort of glittery, fancy, loud things. It happens. But right, sort of fairly sort of near to kind of first being introduced to him, I became aware that he has very odd views. He said that being non-binary or gender fluid is a bit like being gluten-free, i.e. trans trending, which is a lovely term. There's nothing about this is fashionable. And then we have Romario, or Romario, I think it was, who is, I've written, very masculine, seems to be challenged by the idea of more than two genders. It's a cultural thing. I forget where Romario's from. I think it might be in Brazil, but he was saying that, you know, like, that gender is very much man, woman, and that he's very proud of his masculinity. And as soon as he said that, I kind of had an inkling that he might be trans, but, you know, again, I didn't want to make that judgment. I sort of tried, focused really hard on keeping an open mind whilst watching it, because it was important to me to do that. and that, you know, that sort of, you know, culturally speaking, sort of, for him, he felt that men were very much manly men, which, to me, in my head again, alarm bells. Oh, toxic masculinity. Sorry guys, I know that some of you don't like that term, but yeah. And then we have Philomena, who said that basically she thinks that to be a woman, you need a womb. And then I've written it down. It may not be an exact quote, but I've written it in quotes. So, that men have penises, women have vaginas. And doesn't believe that gender is a spectrum. And I don't think she actually believes that much that trans men are men and trans women are women. I think she might err on the TERF territory. I don't know if she's a feminist, but I think, you know, the same sort of beliefs that, you know, and I hate to say it, that trans women are men that have... I was watching a thing with a sweary name to me with Germaine Greer in earlier, where Germaine Greer said that what did she say? That just because you reject the masculinity that you were born into does not make you a woman. That hurts me in my head, but more on that later. On a different video, we'll talk about TERFs at some other point, but I felt that this was important, and also it's coincidental that it happened on the day that okay, and then we have Howie. Howie is a cisgendered lesbian, but refers to herself as the boy in the relationship, which is cringy heteronormative terms. I don't like them. I didn't even like them when I did identify as a lesbian. It made me, neither one of us is a boy. And when she was younger, she thought she was a boy. Now, that struck a chord with me because, well, she thought she was a boy because only boys like girls. And that struck a chord with me because when I was younger and sort of first coming to terms with sexuality and sexual awareness and things like that, I thought I must be a boy because I find women attractive. And then for me, this is not always the case, but for me, coming out as lesbian sort of kind of helped a little, but ultimately I still wasn't being true to myself, and I needed to kind of come out in a different direction. And here we have me, nearly 7 months on testosterone, very low dose of testosterone, but 7 months there. You can hear that my voice has changed a little, but also I think I don't know if I have a cold or if it's just that my voice is breaking and it's hurting, which it did last time, so yeah. But you know, she's different to me in that respect, in that she sort of seemed to have kind of become very happy in her femininity, whereas I didn't. I progressively got more and more, I became more and more unhappy in my femininity, or the femininity that I was sort of forcing myself into. Yeah, there's a lot of focus on passing in this, from the sort of more binary trans women there, and I wish it wasn't there. I wish that the focus on passing just wasn't a thing for anyone, because it puts so much more stress on a situation that's already pretty awful. You know, like, and I get it, I really do, especially for trans women. I don't get it because I've lived it. I haven't. I can only get it because I see it, and I hear stories constantly about, you know, being victimized and all sorts of things. And if trans women, certain trans women, were able to pass, then, you know, then they'd be safer, for one thing. That, and also feeling that they need to be, well, that they have to have a feminine body, and, you know, when you're, I'm gonna sound a bit odd here, but bear with me. When you are born and given the boy cooties, as again Ellen would say, thank you Ellen, it's a wonderful way of putting it, it means that you grow to be X amount of feet tall, like, I don't know, 6'3", and, you know, your bones develop in the way that a boy's does, a man's does. And so when you then transition to be female, it's so much harder to pass. There are some people who are, some women, trans women who are blessed with smaller frames. But on the whole, like, I would say that certainly from that point of view, and various other things, trans women have it so much harder in a lot of ways. I shouldn't say that. But sadly, I'm going to come out with a bit of a sort of feminist agenda here. Sadly, that kind of smacks of male privilege, in that basically when women are transitioning to be women, it could be argued that they are becoming secondary citizens, that they're kind of choosing to do that, whereas the opposite way around, when men decide to, when start to transition, is them kind of stepping up in the world. I discussed this in class, and it, like, at university, and it was interesting. So yeah, there like, particularly in this scene with the hot tub, these poor trans women were kind of talking about tucking and not wanting to fall out and not wanting to be obvious, and I just felt really bad for them. So next point. More than two genders are intimidating to Romario. I think I discussed this earlier, where he kind of sort of talks about how he's very proud of his masculinity, so on and so forth. And then I said that was when I started to have an inkling he might be trans, but, you know, I wasn't sure, and I was trying to keep an open mind. Now, it does actually transpire that he is trans, because they discover that, because there's one moment where he runs out into the beach and strips his top off and just jumps in the water. Great! I long for the day I can do that. I'm so excited. One day. But I've realised my face is bright red. Sorry, it's warm. But they start to, like, the group of people there with him start to speculate as to whether he's trans or not, because of the scars on his chest. And that's fine. They decide, you know, not to broach it, not to do anything really, because they're like, it's up to him. It's his decision. This is the right way to do it, as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to say that a lot because, as far as I'm concerned, or, like, you know, whatever, because I don't want people to think that this is the way that... I'm not talking, like, on behalf of the whole trans community. I'm talking about my beliefs, okay? And yeah, and then later on, when they get back to the house, because they kind of did things separately, and when they get back to the house, they discuss one of them, I think it was Howie, discusses this with Marcus, who wasn't there, who is the one that sort of says, I'm just a man, a bloke that likes to wear makeup, basically, is what he said. Now, I'm going to bring this up now. I had written it down to bring up later, but I'm going to do it now because it links. The way he deals with this situation, as far as I'm concerned, so wrong. In that, so Romario and Filomena have been kind of flirting on and off, and they're finding their feet, and they're kind of, you know, it's cute, it's nice. And I think there's a kiss. But Marcus then takes it upon himself to challenge Romario, first of all, and sort of say, you know, are you trans? Do you identify as trans? And Romario said like something like along the lines of define trans, when you know, when do I stop being trans, kind of thing. And he doesn't disagree. He just says, you know, something along the lines of something about challenging it. Where did I put it somewhere? Oh yes, here. When challenged, Romario says we shouldn't challenge people about their identity. He isn't proud to be trans. He is very much kind of wants to be cisgendered, which, you know, is so much of the community is like that. When he said that, my heart broke, because I am proud to be trans. I kind of I've always been proud to be different. Like if you call me weird, I sort of go, cool, yes, I am. Well done. And from the, you know, but I can sort of understand like why you wouldn't be proud to be trans and why you want to identify as this and why you would never want to introduce yourself as a trans person. But what I wrote here, and again, this is my viewpoint, this is not everybody else's, but I said, there are so many folks that transition that aren't proud. We need to hold the flags higher for them so that they, those of us who are proud to be trans, which means those of us who are a bit more kind of outspoken on trans things, can speak for them so that we can be visible for them, and so that we can help them kind of fight their battles in a louder way. They might not actually appreciate that. I didn't think about that. But basically, like, you know, I want to be supportive of all people in the trans community. And I just feel like if I can use my powers for good, I'm gonna. This Marcus chap, my favourite, then actually tells the girl that he kissed that he's trans. So he outs Romario to Filomena when it's not any of his business. None of his business at all. This will actually link back into another thing that I'm about to talk about anyway. But one of the things about dating that I'm finding a bit weird, I think I might have mentioned it before, I don't know if I have, sorry, is the whole when do you disclose that you're trans dating question. Do you disclose it right at the start on the very first date? I mean, sometimes you date people that you've known for years anyway, but like generally if they're a stranger, do you put it on your Tinder profile? How do you do it? When is right? And I have come to the conclusion that if I'm comfortable sort of disclosing it straight off, I will. And if I'm not, then I don't. But everybody is entitled to do it their own way. There's no uniform, there's no kind of, what do you call it, manual that says that you should and shouldn't do it a particular way. But this Marcus guy just seemed to think that he was being dishonest and all this stuff. And his excuse for him having such an aversion to dishonesty doesn't excuse what he did. I get it, because I'm getting better with it, but I used to have such a thing about honesty, and a thing about clarity as well, because for me clarity and honesty were the same thing. But in this particular case, Romario isn't being dishonest. He doesn't actually say he's not trans, he just doesn't disclose that he is. That is between him and the person that he's interested in. For him, it was very much it was a fuck you gesture, and it was horrible. And I don't think this Marcus person dealt with it correctly. I don't even think that they showed any remorse. There was no apology. There was nothing. It was frankly insulting, and upsetting for me. But yes, so the whole dating thing that I mentioned a few seconds ago, the women do talk about it, and non-binary Saffron as well, and Saffron finds it hard, because they were saying that they get a lot of sort of men kind of asking slightly inappropriate questions, I think, or just asking what it means to be non-binary, which in itself I've said many times is exhausting constantly, having to validate yourself to people. However, for me, conversely, I did actually, I have signed up to Tinder, and I did put on my profile that I'm non-binary. Mainly because I don't want to kind of stress about the process of coming out to people, because as I said, when do you do it? So I just went, you know what, I'm just going to eliminate that, and if people don't like it, then Tinder is such that basically, like, they don't have to match with me. Most of the people that I've spoken to on Tinder have either been genderqueer themselves, or have been sort of sympathetic about it. May not always understand it, like when it sort of, I've been talking about like being dysphoric in certain ways, they kind of go, what's that? But you know, generally on the whole, people are pretty cool with me. But Saffron has a different experience, and I feel sorry for them. That's not cool. One of the other things that I liked, and I think again I've mentioned it before, I don't know, my memory's really poor and I don't like watching the videos back, so again, if this is really repetitive, I'm sorry, just bear with me, okay? We will get there. I will start to sort of feel a bit more confident and actually look back at my videos and go, oh, I don't look like a potato. Or I do and I can ignore it. But one of my favourite moments, because it reminded me of a conversation that I'd had not that long ago actually about orgasms, was that the two trans women, they were discussing sort of like what the difference in your hormones is like, and Campbell, who is the one that has been on hormones for 6 years, was like sort of saying that her orgasms are longer and more intense, Conversely, for me, and this was an interesting thing because I wasn't really sure how that would impact me. I knew that the orgasms change. I just didn't know, or can change. I just didn't know how it would impact me because I was on a low dose of testosterone. I've now been doubled to a sort of slightly less low. And for me, my orgasm sort of shifted from a slow and gradual build that was like super intense to this punch in the gut thing. It was like a gun going off, like, and it was really strong but very short, but like so much stronger than before, that I was like, oh, this is new, and it's very shiny and it's interesting. So I'm glad that they brought that up, because I don't know, it's kind of one of those questions that I don't think maybe those who are questioning their gender or who are about to start transitioning, they may not think about it. But then, you know, let me see, I think, have I actually covered it all? This is really cute. So in this episode, the Howie, the one that identifies as a cis lesbian, developed a little crush, and it was cute, on Campbell. And Campbell, I don't think, has ever had a lesbian crush on her before. And it was really sweet, and they sort of kind of, they had a few little moments, a few little things here and there, and then at the end of it, Campbell sort of said, having that moment with Howie was incredibly validating, and I can see that, and you can see it in her face. She just radiates this just joy that yeah, and I think she hadn't really kind of thought that she might have lesbian experiences before. I think she maybe sort of identified mostly as a heterosexual woman. But yeah, you know, it just goes to show you that these things are all fluid, in a sense. But I kind of, I want to say something. This is speaking as someone who identifies as non-binary. To the binary people in my life, and not in my life, just in general, I can understand especially why trans binary people feel intimidated, or not intimidated, but like their gender status might be being challenged by people who are non-binary. But I can assure you that certainly from my point of view, that is not what I'm trying to do. That's not why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. Purely and simply for me, it is because I don't identify as either. It's not that I'm trying to challenge norms or do anything like that. It's very, very basic. I'm not either. Sometimes I'm both, you know, sometimes I'm neither. So but it is not my intention to kind of upset an equilibrium there. Although I do think that sort of society's gender roles and gender kind of perception of gender should be challenged. I think it needs to be put under the microscope a lot, which is why I'm glad that this season is happening. As I said, I'm not necessarily glad about some of the choices that Channel 4 have made with regards to it, but it's still there, and we're still, you know, we're still sort of getting more visibility, and it's not like, I don't feel like non-binary people in that we're kind of painted in a bad light. I could be wrong. The series will unfold and we'll see what happens with more of it, but on the whole I am glad it's happening. I just think that the rules need to be loosened, and I think the rules are being loosened in terms of what makes gender. Anyway, so that's everything, kids. And yeah, and I call everyone kids. Sorry. It's not offensive. I don't think that the whole world is younger than me, although some people would argue that it is. But yeah, if you want to challenge my viewpoints, please do, by the way. And if you want to, if you have ideas for videos, if you want to ask me questions, if you just want to pay me a compliment, look at my hair, fine, please do. I'm joking. I'm not joking. But yeah, no, please, give me a shout. And we'll, I'll sort of think about ways in which I can accommodate your needs if you have any. Anyway, bye-bye, YouTube!